Imagine planning your own birthday party, paying for every detail, inviting everyone who matters to you, only to realize you weren't the guest of honor. You were the punchline. Pause. She didn't just divorce me, she made sure everyone watched. In front of everyone. And while I stood there frozen trying to understand what was happening, her mother started clapping, not loudly, not wildly, just slow, deliberate claps that echoed through the dining room like a verdict being read. The candles were still burning on my cake. 42. My son was holding a plastic fork, smiling because he thought it was part of the surprise. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else whispered, "Is this a joke?" I remember the smell of barbecue sauce in the air, the cheap vanilla frosting melting under the patio lights, and the way my hands began to shake so badly the envelope slipped through my fingers. The papers scattered at my feet. "You didn't think I'd do it," she said quietly. "But I am." And just like that, 12 years of marriage became a public spectacle. But what hurt more than the divorce was the reason she did it, and why, months later, they both came begging me to come back. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Her name was Emily. We met 13 years earlier at a community college in Ohio. I was studying mechanical engineering at night while working full-time at an auto repair shop. She was in nursing school, always tired, always determined. We didn't fall in love dramatically. It happened over vending machine dinners and shared rides home in my old Ford pickup. She used to say, "We're building something solid," and I believed her. We married 2 years later in a small church with folding chairs and a borrowed sound system that crackled during our vows. We didn't have much, but we had plans. We bought a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, white siding, a maple tree in the front yard. We argued about paint colors and laughed about how thin the walls were. When our son, Caleb, was born, I cried in the hospital hallway because I had never felt that kind of responsibility before. I promised myself I would never embarrass him, never fail him, and for a long time I thought I was keeping that promise. The problems didn't start with screaming, they started with silence. Emily began working longer shifts at the hospital. 12 hours became 14. She came home exhausted, distant. "You wouldn't understand," she would say when I asked what was wrong. Her mother, Diane, started visiting more often. Diane had never approved of me. She thought Emily could have done better. She never said it directly, but it lived in the way she looked at my grease-stained hands, the way she'd ask, "Still at the shop?" Like it was temporary. 6 months before that birthday party, Emily's hospital announced budget cuts. Promotions were competitive. She wanted a supervisory role and she was under pressure. Around the same time, the repair shop lost a major contract. My hours were cut. I didn't tell her immediately. I thought I could fix it. I picked up side jobs. I sold my old guitar, but stress has a smell. It lingers in a house, and she could sense it. 3 months before the party, she accused me of hiding money. I was hiding fear. "You're dragging us down," she said one night in the kitchen, her voice low so Caleb wouldn't hear. "I can't keep carrying everything." I remember staring at the chipped tile on the counter thinking, I thought we were carrying it together. We stopped eating dinner at the table. We stopped talking about the future. Deanne began whispering things when I left the room. I'd walk back in and they'd go quiet. Have you ever felt like a guest in your own home? Like your presence shifts the temperature? I started staying later at work even when there wasn't much to do, sitting in my truck, listening to sports radio just to delay walking inside. I kept telling myself it was a phase, that marriages bend but don't break that easily. I was wrong. 2 weeks before my birthday, Emily asked me to sign a refinance document. She said it would help lower the mortgage. I trusted her. I signed without reading every line. That was my mistake. The night of the party, when she handed me those papers, I saw familiar terms buried in the text. The house had been transferred into her name months earlier. Diane had helped her with the legal fees. The refinance wasn't about lowering payments. It was about removing me. "You left me no choice," Emily said at the party, her voice calm while guests pretended to check their phones. "You're unstable, you're hiding things. I need security for my son. My son, not our son." That word hit harder than the clapping. Someone was recording. I could see the red light blinking. I wanted to disappear. Have you ever been judged in a single moment as if your entire life could be summarized in whispers? I packed a duffel bag that night. Caleb hugged my leg and asked, "Are you coming back tomorrow?" I told him, "Of course." I lied. I moved into a small apartment above a hardware store. The carpet smelled like dust and old paint. I slept on an air mattress for the first month. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Emily received primary custody. I got alternating weekends. Diane attended every court date, sitting upright like a supervisor. Emily claimed I was financially reckless. The truth was simpler. I had been laid off 2 weeks after my birthday. The shop closed. I didn't tell her because I was ashamed. Instead of admitting I was struggling, I tried to solve it alone. And in that silence, she built a case against me. But here, where the story shifts. Because 6 months after the divorce was finalized, something happened that none of us expected. Emily's hospital conducted an internal audit. A senior administrator had been falsifying staffing reports. Promotions, including the supervisory role Emily had received shortly after our separation, were under investigation. She hadn't committed fraud, but she had signed off on paperwork she hadn't fully reviewed. The hospital placed her on administrative leave. Suddenly, the stable income she had fought so hard for was uncertain. Legal fees piled up. Diane's health also began to decline around the same time. A mild stroke left her partially dependent. The woman who had clapped at my humiliation now needed assistance walking to the bathroom. Life has a way of rearranging certainty. One evening, 8 months after the party, my phone rang. It was Emily. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. "Can we talk?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch. We met at a coffee shop near the courthouse. She looked tired, not the rushed kind of tired, the kind that settles behind the eyes. "I made a mistake," she said. No dramatic tears, no excuses, just that. She admitted Diane had pushed for the public divorce to send a message. She admitted she believed distancing herself from me would make her look more stable for the promotion. "I thought if I cut you out, everything else would fall into place," she said. I was wrong. Then she said something that stayed with me. "Caleb asks why you left every time he gets in trouble. He thinks it's his fault." That sentence broke something open inside me. Have you ever realized the story you were telling yourself isn't the one your child is living? 2 months later, Diane called me directly. Her speech was slower from the stroke. "I misjudged you," she said. "It wasn't warm, it wasn't affectionate, but it was honest. Emily eventually lost the supervisory role. She kept her nursing position, but the salary difference was significant. Medical bills for Diane added pressure. They both asked if I would consider moving back in. Not as husband immediately, not as a romantic reunion, but as a family trying to repair damage. I had rebuilt my life by then. I had started working for a logistics company, steady income, a modest savings account, peace. The humiliation from that birthday still echoed in my memory. The clapping, the whispers, the recording phone. I asked myself a question I want to ask you now. If the people who publicly broke you came back privately asking for help, what would you do? I didn't move back in right away. For 3 months we attended counseling. We talked about pride, about fear, about how silence can look like guilt. Emily admitted she valued appearances over partnership. I admitted I let shame replace communication. Deanne apologized directly to me in the living room where she once criticized me. "I thought strength looked like control," she said. I was wrong. 1 year after that birthday party, I stood in the same backyard. No guests this time. Just the three of us and a small chocolate cake Caleb insisted on picking. Emily handed me an envelope again. My chest tightened. She smiled faintly. "Open it," she said. Inside were new property documents. My name restored beside hers. Equal ownership, equal responsibility. No applause this time, just quiet. The kind of quiet that feels earned. We didn't erase what happened. We acknowledged it. Trust rebuilt slowly, like repairing an engine piece by piece instead of replacing the whole machine. 2 years later, our marriage is different. Less performance, more honesty. Diane lives with us now. Caleb is taller. Sometimes I still think about that first envelope, and the way the candles kept burning while my world shifted. And I wonder how many people watching this have experienced their own public humiliation. Their own moment where the floor dropped beneath them while others watched. Did you rebuild? Did you walk away? Did you forgive? Stories like this aren't about perfect endings. They're about choices made after pride collapses. If you were in my place, standing there with papers at your feet and whispers in your ears, what would you have done? And if you were in hers, chasing security so desperately you lost sight of loyalty, would you have recognized it in time? At the time, I thought she was just stressed. I had no idea she was planning something that would destroy me publicly. For months, the small signs were easy to dismiss. She came home later than usual, claiming she'd been catching up with friends. The tone of her messages changed, short, clipped, almost mechanical. She started locking her phone when she was normally so open, and I noticed the passwords had changed without explanation. I told myself it was normal. Work was hard. Life was stressful. I kept believing in us. I told myself, Emily's always been charming, she just needs space sometimes. But even small things started gnawing at me. A receipt from a restaurant I'd never heard of, a car parked in the driveway that wasn't mine. My chest would tighten every time she said, "Don't worry about it, it's nothing." And I did worry. Every night I would lie awake on the couch, Caleb asleep in his room, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, wondering what I was missing. I had spent 6 years building this life, every brick, every dollar, every late-night shift at the factory. I'd done it for her, for our family. I had funded her small boutique, covered the rent when her business was slow, even drove her to meetings across town on my days off. I never asked for recognition. I didn't need applause. I just wanted a home that felt safe. And slowly, slowly, the home I thought we built together began to feel foreign. The warmth was gone. There were whispered conversations I could hear when I passed the living room, laughter that didn't include me. Emily was still smiling, still charming to friends and strangers, but at home she felt like someone else entirely. It started with small things, invitations I wasn't included in, dinners that were girls only, nights out that she insisted were just for fun. I tried to let it slide. I told myself she deserved friendships outside our marriage, but my gut told me something was off. I began to notice the little patterns. Her phone would buzz when she was in the shower. The screen would go black the moment I entered the room. She became defensive over harmless questions. "Why do you need to see my phone?" She asked once. I said nothing. I didn't want to fight, and maybe that silence was my first mistake. Before the birthday party, I had no idea how far it had gone. I thought her distance was temporary, maybe just stress from balancing the business, motherhood, and our life together. I never imagined that my own home, the place where I had poured years of sweat and loyalty, could become the stage for my humiliation. And yet, every late night she spent with friends, every secretive message, every changed password was a seed planted for that moment. A seed I didn't see, a storm I couldn't feel approaching. And so, when she handed me those papers in front of everyone, the shock wasn't just in the act itself. It was in the months of subtle betrayal that I hadn't recognized. In hindsight, every dinner she skipped, every evening spent away, every excuse that seemed harmless, they were all part of a story I wasn't allowed to read. And I wonder now, did I really miss the signs, or did I simply refuse to see them because to acknowledge them would have meant losing everything I had worked for? Before we dive deeper, tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly. The words "I love you" that used to float across the kitchen table in the mornings disappeared. She would nod at me from across the room, smile politely, but those 3 words, the ones that used to make me feel seen, safe, like our marriage mattered, vanished. At night, she stopped reaching for my hand. The light brush of her fingers that used to ease my exhaustion was gone. She slept facing away from me, a wall of distance that grew taller each day. I tried to bridge it. I left small notes in her purse, kissed her forehead when she passed by, offered to help with errands, but she moved like I wasn't there, like I had become invisible in my own home. I remember the hollow pit in my stomach when Caleb would ask, "Why doesn't mommy hug you anymore?" and I had no answer. Then came the financial surprises. It began with little things, cash withdrawals from our joint account that I didn't recognize, unexplained charges at stores I had never heard of. At first, I chalked it up to mistakes or forgotten receipts, but the pattern grew impossible to ignore. One evening, I found a folder tucked in the back of her nightstand. Inside, a bank statement with a name I didn't recognize. A separate account she had opened in secret. My mind raced. I had spent years working overtime, building a foundation for us, funding her small business, supporting our family, trusting her completely. And now, here was proof that she had been making decisions, significant financial decisions, without telling me, without consulting me. The betrayal cut deeper than money ever could. And then there was her mother, Deanne. Every visit became a minefield. I would walk into the living room and the conversation would stop abruptly. Laughter would fade. Whispered words exchanged across the room just out of my earshot. I would catch phrases like, "He doesn't understand the pressures," or "A real man would have done more by now." Those words stung, but it wasn't just the sting. It was the way Emily's eyes would flicker toward her mother, the almost imperceptible nod that confirmed she was listening. They were quietly conspiring, shaping her perception of me while I was in the dark. I confronted her once late at night when the house was empty and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. "Emily," I said, voice low, trying not to scare Caleb, who was asleep down the hall, "what is going on? Why are you avoiding me? Why all these withdrawals?" She didn't answer immediately. She just looked at me with that charming smile I used to adore, but now it carried a weight, a distance, a calculation I couldn't recognize. I just need space," she murmured, barely meeting my eyes. "You don't understand what I'm trying to do for us." And that's when it hit me. The real shock wasn't the distance. It wasn't the secret account, the late nights, or the vanished affection. It was who she was listening to behind closed doors, who had been whispering in her ear every step of the way. Every decision, every doubt, every grievance carefully nurtured, carefully manipulated by someone whose approval mattered more than the life we had built together. I had been working, sacrificing, loving, trusting. And while I thought we were partners, someone else had been steering the course of my marriage. Someone who never liked me, never trusted me, and who had been quietly turning her against me for months. I sat there on the edge of the couch, the weight of it pressing down. Every glance she gave me, every polite nod, every withheld touch, it suddenly made sense. And yet, even knowing this, I felt powerless. I wanted to confront her. I wanted answers. But I also wanted to protect Caleb from the storm that was quietly brewing under our roof. The betrayal was no longer abstract. It was real, living, and breathing in every corner of the house. And I couldn't stop it, not yet. I planned that birthday party myself. Every detail. I wanted it to be perfect, not just for me, but for Emily, for Caleb, for everyone who mattered to us. I reserved the hall at our favorite community center, hired a catering service we couldn't usually afford, and personally invited friends, neighbors, even her family, yes, even Diane. I wanted laughter, music, warmth. I wanted the room to feel alive with joy, to be the kind of night people would remember fondly. I bought a chocolate cake with extra frosting for Caleb, champagne for the adults, and even put together a small speech, rehearsed quietly in front of the bathroom mirror, trying not to sound stiff or forced. When the night came, everything looked perfect. Guests mingled, glasses clinked, balloons swayed in the soft light, and I felt that rush of happiness, the kind that comes when you know you did something with love, when you see the people you care about gathered under one roof. I stood up during the party, tapped my glass lightly, and began to speak. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. And I especially want to thank my wife, Emily, the love of my life. You've been my partner, my best friend, my confidant for 6 incredible years. Thank you for sharing this journey with me." I smiled at her. She looked back, but the warmth I expected to see wasn't there. She was cold, distant. Her eyes flickered briefly toward Diane, who smirked ever so slightly from across the room. And in that instant, a chill ran down my spine. The irony of it all was suffocating. I had spent months noticing her distance, her secretive behavior, her cold touches, and yet here I was, publicly praising her, calling her the love of my life, while the very people who had quietly orchestrated my humiliation were sitting within arm's reach, watching, waiting. I forced a laugh when someone whispered congratulations, tried to brush it off, but I could feel it, tension rippling just beneath the surface. Every smile felt forced, every toast felt fragile, like glass that could shatter at any moment. Looking back now, the signs were there. The late nights, the secret account, the whispered conversations with Diane, the avoidance of simple affection, they all pointed to this moment. And she wasn't celebrating me. She wasn't here to enjoy the party. She was waiting, waiting for her moment to strike, for the crescendo of betrayal that would leave me exposed, humiliated, and stunned in front of everyone I cared about. Every laugh in the room, every cheer, every clink of a glass, it was a countdown. And I didn't even realize it. I remember looking around, seeing friends smiling, Caleb's eyes wide as he clutched his fork, and thinking, this is everything I've worked for. This is happiness. Little did I know that the very thing I had built, love, trust, family, was about to be used as the stage for my greatest heartbreak. And the cruelest part, I had done it all with my heart open, with my pride in the balance, and with the complete faith that she was by my side. The room was buzzing with laughter and chatter when she tapped her glass for attention. The sound was sharp, commanding, impossible to ignore. Everyone fell quiet, turning toward her. I smiled, thinking it was part of the celebration, that she had a gift or a toast to make. But then she said it, slow, deliberate, like each word had been rehearsed. I have a surprise too. My heart skipped a beat. I tried to hide it with a small laugh, assuming it was playful. Emily stepped forward, holding a crisp envelope. My hands shook slightly as I reached for it. The paper felt heavier than it should have, as if the weight of what was inside had already settled on my chest. I opened it slowly, carefully, trying to prolong the moment, hoping somehow it would just be a joke. But it was. The divorce papers slipped out, cold and final, and my stomach sank into a pit I didn't know existed. Guests gasped. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Others froze, unsure where to look. Deanne, her mother, began clapping. Slow, measured, deliberate, like the sound of judgment echoing in the room. Phones flickered as people recorded, capturing the moment I had always thought was private, my humiliation now a performance for anyone with a camera. Some guests laughed nervously, unsure if they were supposed to join in or pretend it wasn't happening. And in that instant I realized, in their eyes I wasn't a husband, I wasn't a father, I wasn't a man who had spent years building a life for his family. I was entertainment. Emily's voice rang out, calm and chilling. "I deserve better." Those words cut through me sharper than any argument could have. The love, the loyalty, the sacrifices, none of it mattered. All the months of late nights at the shop, all the dinners I cooked, all the bills I paid, the smiles I faked for her, the times I held Caleb and whispered, "Everything will be okay," erased in one sentence. And as I stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of the betrayal, I thought, how could someone I trusted so completely plan to destroy me in front of everyone I cared about? In that moment, everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and family collapsed. The room felt impossibly small, like the walls themselves were closing in on me, and all I could hear was the shuffle of papers, the muted gasps, and Diane's slow, deliberate applause. I tried to reach for Emily, tried to speak, tried to salvage some fragment of dignity, but the moment had passed. And in front of dozens of people, I was no longer a husband. I was a spectacle. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I walked out silently, leaving the clinking glasses, the whispers, and the flashing phone screens behind me. Every step felt heavy, like gravity had doubled, pressing me toward the door and into the night. The cool evening air hit my face as I got into my truck. I started the engine and drove without direction, letting the headlights cut through the darkness. Hopping the motion would empty my mind. Hopping the road could carry away the disbelief. 6 years of love, loyalty, and sacrifice, reduced to paper. Cold, impersonal, and final. I thought about every birthday I had planned, every late shift, every dollar saved to make life easier for them, every scraped knee I'd patched up, every night I'd stayed awake worrying about bills or Caleb's school projects. And it all felt meaningless in that moment. The ache in my chest wasn't just heartbreak. It was the collapse of a life I had carefully built, brick by brick, trust by trust, now crumbling beneath me. I drove past empty streets, past closed diners and shuttered houses, letting the engine hum beneath me. The only sounds were my own thoughts, racing, relentless, echoing against the walls of the truck. I kept asking myself, how could someone you loved, someone you trusted completely, plan such a public betrayal? How could the person who once whispered, "I love you," and we're building this together, be the same one holding the envelope that destroyed everything? But the humiliation, the public spectacle, the stares, the whispers, Diane's smirk, that wasn't even the worst part. What I discovered days later, that would change everything I thought I knew about her, about loyalty, and about the people closest to me. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced, turning over every conversation, every late night, every cold glance I'd ignored. I had to know the truth. I had to understand how 6 years of trust could unravel in silence, so I started looking. Slowly, carefully. I checked her phone when she left for work, scanning messages I had once thought private. At first, I didn't see much: innocent texts, casual plans. But then I noticed patterns. Late-night messages from someone named Mark, a wealthy business investor she'd met through her boutique. The tone was intimate, familiar, calculated. And worse, she wasn't hiding it. She had become meticulous, careful only enough to avoid immediate suspicion. I dug deeper. Receipts for hotel stays she'd claimed were business trips. Voice notes saved on her phone, laughter and whispers that weren't mine. Words I wasn't meant to hear, plans, strategies, timelines. Every piece of evidence hit harder than the last. The realization came slowly, like a shadow creeping across the floor. This wasn't about anger, resentment, or a momentary lapse. This was strategic. The divorce wasn't emotional. It was a plan. Every late night, every secret account, every whispered conversation with Diane, all part of a blueprint. And the blueprint was clear. Once she secured the finances, once she had control of the property and money, she would leave. Not just leave me. Leave our life. Leave the family we had built together. Every carefully measured smile at the party, every polite nod while I praised her, every word she had ever said in front of our friends, all staged. All designed to humiliate me and ensure I had no leverage when the time came. I felt my chest tighten, my hands tremble, and for the first time I saw her and her mother not as family, but as architects of my destruction. I replayed the months of subtle betrayals in my mind. The secret bank account, the withdrawals I had ignored, the late nights she claimed were for friends, the whispered words Diane had thrown like poison whenever I left the room, every instinct I had brushed aside, every gut feeling I had silenced, they had all been warnings. And I realized something worse than the humiliation of that party. I had been blind. I had trusted blindly, loved blindly, and in that trust they had built the perfect plan to leave me with nothing but questions, shame, and heartbreak. Months passed and I stopped looking back. I poured every ounce of energy I had into rebuilding my life, starting with work. I returned to the foundation I had once ignored, the skills I had honed over years of late nights and hard labor. I started a small logistics company, one I could manage and grow on my own terms. Slowly, carefully, I began to see progress. I invested wisely, made connections I had once overlooked, and watched the pieces of my life fall into place, not overnight, but steadily, like a structure being rebuilt brick by brick. I also rebuilt myself. I started working out regularly, not for anyone else, not for vanity, but to regain confidence I had lost when my trust had been shattered. I could feel strength returning to my body, focus returning to my mind. I laughed more freely, I slept better, and for the first time in months I felt in control of my own story. Every morning I reminded myself that I didn't need validation from the people who had betrayed me. Meanwhile, the world I had left behind began to crumble for them. Emily's new man, the so-called investor she had trusted, turned out to be nothing more than a fraud, a man who vanished with promises of wealth and opportunities that never existed. Her boutique, once a symbol of her independence and ambition, failed within months. Money she thought was secure evaporated. And Diane, who had once clapped at my humiliation, lost the savings she had foolishly invested with him, thinking it would secure her control. The laughter that had cut so deep into me now echoed back at them, stripped of the power it once had. The irony was inescapable. The same people who had orchestrated my shame, who had whispered and plotted behind my back, who had smiled as I crumbled in front of friends and family, were now facing ruin. And I realized something that no amount of money or recognition could fully satisfy. This wasn't revenge. This was life balancing itself out. Karma, quiet but unstoppable, had a way of finding its mark. And in that moment, I understood something profound. The strength to rebuild, to rise above humiliation, doesn't come from wanting justice. It comes from reclaiming your own life. One night, months after I had rebuilt a life I thought I would never have again, there was a knock on my door. I hesitated before opening it, my hand lingering on the handle, a mix of caution and curiosity swirling in my chest. When I swung the door open, I saw her, Emily. Her makeup smudged, her eyes red from crying. She was trembling, fragile in a way I had never seen before. And behind her, Diane stood silently, watching, saying nothing, her usual smirk replaced with a quiet unease I couldn't ignore. Emily spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "We made a mistake," she said. The words hung in the air, fragile but desperate. "Please come back." My chest tightened, memories flashing like lightning, the party, the envelope, the public humiliation, every betrayal I had endured. I took a breath, steadying myself, listening as she continued. "We were manipulated," she admitted, her voice breaking. "We thought we were protecting ourselves, but we were wrong. Everything went too far." The woman who had once handed me those papers, the one who had clapped while my world fell apart, was now trembling in front of me, vulnerable, pleading, and human in a way that shocked me. The reversal was staggering. The tables had turned, but not because I had sought revenge. It was the quiet reckoning of life itself, forcing them to confront the consequences of their own choices. Every apology, every tear, every word of regret was a reminder of the power I had once surrendered to them, and that I had now reclaimed. I stood there silent, letting the moment stretch. Part of me wanted to believe it was real, that their remorse was genuine. Part of me wanted to slam the door and never look back. But beneath it all, I realized this was a test, not of forgiveness, but of strength. The same hands that had signed papers to erase me, the same voices that had whispered to manipulate and control, were now extended toward me, trembling, asking for restoration. And in that silence I understood. Life had a strange way of balancing itself, sometimes quietly, sometimes painfully, and sometimes, at long last, leaving the ones who hurt you to face the weight of their own choices. I listened quietly as they pleaded, their voices raw, their eyes desperate. Every word they spoke, every tear they shed, echoed in the room like a haunting reminder of everything they had done. And then I spoke slowly, deliberately, letting the weight of each syllable land. "I knew," I said, my voice calm but unwavering. "I knew about the affair before the party." Their mouths opened, closed, opened again. Shock flashed across Emily's face. Diane's hands trembled. I let the pause stretch, savoring the quiet power in the moment. "I stayed silent," I continued, "to see how far you'd go, to see if appearances mattered more than loyalty, to see if the life we built meant anything at all." I could see realization dawning in their eyes, the slow, painful understanding that the control they had wielded over me, the humiliation they had orchestrated, had never been complete. "And the truth is," I said, letting the words sink in, "I already signed the divorce long ago, not as a reaction to you, not in anger, but because I needed to free myself from the illusion of who I thought you were." My gaze met Emily's, steady, unwavering. "You didn't divorce me that night," I said, my voice gaining quiet authority. "I divorced the illusion of you." The effect was immediate and devastating. Diane's composure shattered first. Years of judgment and manipulation collapsed into sobs, hands clutching at the arms of the chair she had once sat in smug defiance. Emily collapsed next, tears flowing freely, her trembling body overwhelmed with the weight of guilt and loss. The woman who had handed me my greatest humiliation, who had plotted with her mother, who had smiled in the face of my heartbreak, was now broken in the most human way, raw, vulnerable, and forced to confront the consequences of her own choices. In that moment, I understood something profound. Revenge had never been my aim. Power, control, or pride were never the goal. The true climax was witnessing truth and accountability unfold naturally. The illusion of love and loyalty they had tried to manipulate into my world had been stripped away, leaving only honesty, painful, humbling, and final. And as I stood there, silent and steady, I realized that the life I had once feared lost was, in fact, stronger than ever, built not on illusions or manipulation, but on resilience, patience, and the quiet strength to wait for the truth to reveal itself. In the quiet that followed, I stood alone for a moment, letting the weight of what had happened settle. The laughter, the whispers, the flashing phones, the clapping, it all faded into memory. Public humiliation had its sting, but private strength, that was where true power lived. Betrayal had revealed more than their intentions. It had revealed character, theirs, mine, and the fragile line between trust and blindness. I realized then that silence, patience, and restraint are not weakness. They are quiet weapons, tools that let the truth surface without force. Losing them didn't break me. It revealed me. Every sacrifice, every heartbreak, every moment of doubt had built something unshakable inside. I had been tested, and I had survived, not as the man they had tried to humiliate, but as the man who had chosen integrity over reaction, foresight over impulse, and dignity over anger. I moved on, slowly at first, then with purpose. New peace settled over my life like a soft dawn, and self-respect, once threatened, was restored. I rebuilt my world not on the ruins of revenge, but on the foundation of resilience, on lessons learned, and on the knowledge that life will always balance itself if we remain patient, vigilant, and true to ourselves. And as I looked ahead, I understood. The greatest victories are quiet, internal, and lasting, far beyond any applause or betrayal. So what would you have done? Taken her back or walked away forever? I want to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments, tell me where you're watching from, how this story made you feel, and what you think you would have done in my place. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you of the strength it takes to survive betrayal and reclaim your life, subscribe for more real-life stories that hit deep, stories that reveal the human heart in all its complexity, resilience, and truth.